Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, John.
Welcome to the Easton Historical Society and Museum. Very excited today, and our open house is dedicated to our Easton military veterans and heroes. Veterans Day, of course, was observed, and yesterday they had a great parade out here in a memorial service over here, right at the Veterans Square. It was awesome. If you didn't get down there, they had I love seeing the hook and ladder out there with the American flag hanging down. It looks absolutely awesome. But welcome. Just a couple things before we get going with our speakers, which I think is going to be the key piece of today. Around this part of the museum, the south side, you're going to see an awful lot of changes for today for our open house. You've got now, you see the branches of service. I guess we missed the Space Force, right? And so we've got the branches up there now. We hadn't had that before. Thank you, Rick Coe, for donating those. We've got an awful lot of the portraits and big pictures we had on the back wall. We've got a great shadow box of Ernie Camara right in the left-hand corner. That's absolutely beautiful. We got Warren Moffett with that shadow box right there. I love the one from Steadfast Rubber. That was a handmade one with the eagle and all the folks that worked there that were in World War II. They signed their names. It's like one kind of a penmanship, so maybe somebody did the names for them. So you look right around the room. You can see we've got George Schindler. And Schindler is the namesake for the VFW. We have George Shepard, and by the way, he was the first killed in World War I from Easton. And if you look around, you can see probably in the World War I section, we start off with the Revolutionary War, and we go up to the Civil War. They got a beautiful sword there. World War I, World War II, Vietnam. All the Persian wars up here with Kuwait and Iraq and Afghanistan. You'll see an awful lot of World War II memorabilia, some pieces in here, but you'll find some great things. I want you to appreciate all those donations and people that have just brought things down to us so we could show them off for today. We've got great uniforms. You're looking right here on the left. And I think we have Frank Carlson's uniform in here. We have Sergeant Carlson. We also have, this is Duke Duhamel's right here, and that was his pith helmet as well?
My uncle's.
Your uncle's, okay. We have, in World War I, we've got Mr. Peterson. That's his uniform. We have right here, that's Gustav Peterson, I think, yeah. Ragnar Gustav Peterson, that's his portrait right there. That's his gloves. So we're kind of loaded with everything, and thank you to everybody that came and brought some great pieces to see. But I think the real stars of this open house will be our speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first set of speakers. With us today are Ken and Diane Sterling and Finley. We've got Finley right there. Ken and Diane have lived in Easton for about 46 years. Raised 2 children. Their families are deeply rooted in Easton, in American history. Ken is a member of the Sons of American Revolution, and his son, Chris. And Diane Sterling, a member of the DAR. With daughter, Megan. They have 1 grandchild, Finley. Hi, Finley. Was a member of the CAR, Children of the American Revolution. I just learned that today. They're retired now and been members of Easton Grange. They volunteer as caretakers of a private cemetery in West Bridgewater. Also contributors to, I don't know if you've seen it before on .com, Find a Grave. That was very helpful to me looking at some of my family members. just recently, so it's pretty awesome. And I don't know if you do this, but it seems like I saw people take pictures of the graves and post them, which freaky, I found Mom's grandmother on that out in California, which is great. So without further ado, Sterling's, come on down and I'm going to tell your story a little bit. Here you go, Finley. You can talk all you want, okay? I'm afraid of this guy.
It's not an honor. I don't know if I need this. Can you hear me? If I don't speak into the microphone? Well, thank you for inviting us to recognize our Revolutionary War veterans today. Around 2000, I started my genealogical journey, becoming a daughter of the American Revolution, Deborah Sampson chapter in 2015. Imagine my delight and goosebumps to find I had a revolutionary patriot right here in Easton. One of my DAR goals is to honor and remember as many of my patriots as I am able. We mustn't forget their sacrifices. I'm here today to honor my sixth great-grandfather, great-grandfather, Captain James Perry of Easton. After James' father died, he and his mother went to live with his grandfather, James Leonard, in Taunton. James Leonard was a pretty famous Tauntonian, having one of the first ironworks in the area. Leonard gave a tract of land in Easton to his grandson James in the Furnace Village district. It is there that James owned and operated a successful iron forge beginning in 1773. From 1776 to 1783, James Perry manufactured cannons and cannonballs for Washington Continental Army troops. He is rumored to have actually met with Washington to negotiate the sale of cannons. It's a fun rumor, you know. All rumors have like a little base of fact, right? Perry was captain of a company which marched on the alarm of April 19, 1775. He served in the Army for about 2 years altogether, serving in the battles of Trenton and Princeton. In 1778, he hired soldiers from Norton and Easton out of his own pocket. In 1779, James returned home to manufacture cannons and cannonballs. By 1784, the town of Easton owed Captain Perry 557 pounds, 13 shillings, 13 pence, but there's no record of him ever being reimbursed. You talk to my husband about that, right? The appreciation of money at this point. In 1787, Captain Perry was implicated in Shays' Rebellion and imprisoned in Northampton for a month. He was finally released after townsmen vouched for his integrity, but there was no apology or attempt to restore his reputation, and he was never given a trial, as he requested. His business suffered in his absence. Continental currency depreciated. He ended up having to mortgage the foundry to pay his debts. I'm proud of my 6 times great-grandfather for his selfless sacrifices, and I'm proud of my 6 times great-grandmother, Zoraida, as well. Being a military wife with a large family, all under 10, she is certainly a hero too. Captain James Perry died of lockjaw at age 63 and is interred with his wife, Zervia, at the Dr. Edward Dean Cemetery on Highland Street. In 2022, the Robert Tree Payne chapter, Sons of the American Revolution, saluted James and 4 other Rev War patriots with a wreath laying and grave marking.
Good afternoon. I also have Revolutionary War ancestors. I'm proud to help preserve the history of the Rev War veterans, including slaves and Native Americans. They helped forge this country, sacrificing their lives and fortunes in founding these United States. We owe it to all who served to not let them be forgotten. The Colonel Henry Knox Regimental Color Guard, which is what this uniform is, would be an officer's uniform in an artillery unit, which, if you know the history of Colonel Knox, he's the one that went out to Ticonderoga, absconded with the cannons and brought them into Boston. That was the end of the siege of Boston. We go around, we do several grave markings yearly, statewide. This moving ceremony includes a history of the service of the particular patriot, a wreath laying, and we mark the grave with an SAR flag holder that has a medallion identifying it as such. And then we finish the ritual with a 3-volley musket salute. Anybody have Revolutionary Patriots in their family? Awesome. That's all I have. Like I said, the color guard, we go out and we do a lot of stuff. We're with the Sons of the American Revolution. I was telling Jonathan a couple minutes ago, one of the most rewarding things is to talk to other people and hear who their family is. And some people know that a long time ago, somebody told me that I had a relative who served in the Revolutionary War. Well, then you do the research and you find it. It's like getting a new relative. It's just, it's something to do. That's it. These are pictures of the grave marking that we did at the Dean Cemetery. It has the whole deal, including the musket salute. That's it.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Thank you so much. We're getting people back there. So, Ken, would you turn that on again? I think I probably need to do this. Hello, 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 hello.
Yep.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear now?
Yes.
Good, good. All right, great. Thank you, Ken and Diane. That was awesome. Our next speaker is our own David Ames Jr., one of our great leaders here at the Easton Historical Society Museum. So Easton is big for all of us that the Ameses have been here, but David has been in Easton for a long time. He was here from 44 permanently till about 1956. He did go to some Easton schools, grammar school I think he did. Then went on to Milton Academy. Of course he's a Harvard brat too, all right, so, and then to the Army. He has actually lived in Cambridge since 1972, but he's always been involved here in Easton with all the activities. He also went to Wisconsin Law School, Northeastern University Business School, and in the Army, he was actually language school, artillery OCS, intelligent unit at the NSA. You're starting to scare me, David, now. Also had employment, Society of Arts and Crafts, St. Johnsbury Trucking, First National Bank of Boston for over 30 years. Major activities in Easton, Frothingham Park, Easton Community Corporation, of course, our Historical Society, Friends of Shovelworks, Ames Realty Trust, Langwater Farm, Governor's Estate, Easton Legacy Fund. And he went on to say, yes, Sally is his wife. He was married. He said he forgot that on his first bio. And I ribbed him about that. His 2 grown children and 2 grandchildren, 4 and 1. Without further ado, David Ames Jr.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. Just speaking.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about 2 of my relatives, my dad and Oliver Ames, and the 2 of them have, aside from growing up in Easton, they have in common the fact that as young men, they looked at the world and they really saw war coming, and they got involved early on. And give you a little bit of the Oliver Ames story. He was born in 1895, and he grew up in sheep pasture. He was the younger brother of Mrs. Parker, attended Harvard, and at college, he was a member of the Harvard Regiment. The war broke out before he graduated, and he went into officer training camp immediately at Plattsburgh, New York, graduated as a 2nd lieutenant, sailed to France from Montreal with 165th Regiment of the Rainbow Division. Now that Rainbow Division was to denote they were made up of a whole range of National Guard units. And his was the 165th. And that was formerly known as the Fighting 69th. And the Fighting 69th was actually named by Robert E. Lee because it was originally a division from New York, and it was heavily Irish. And Robert E. Lee thought that they were so good that he referred to them as the Fighting 69th. When the division arrived in France, they spent 3 months in training. And during that training, Wild Bill Donovan, who many of you I'm sure know, was the commander. He put together the OSS, and he was later the first head of the CIA. And I recommend to you reading something about Wild Bill Donovan. He had the most amazing career. I hadn't realized all the things that he had done, but it was pretty impressive. Anyway, Wild Bill Donovan put him in charge of a 62-man fatigue detail. The fatigue detail is just soldiers who aren't under arms. They're doing, I don't know, various projects, but it's not in the military. Donovan appointed him as his adjutant as the first lieutenant, so he was the first assistant to Donovan. Then 6 months later, Colonel Douglas MacArthur, who was the chief of staff of the Rainbow Division, said that he would like the Oliver Ames to become his aide-de-camp. But in a letter to his mother, he said he didn't think he'd like him, and so he never was MacArthur's aide-de-camp. Now, in the fighting from the February to June 1918, he was in a series of sectors in northwest France on the border with Germany. After that, he moved a little bit further north opposite Belgium and Luxembourg. And this was when the militaries of both countries, Germany and the Allies, were lined up opposed to each other. And it was, shelling and trench warfare. Very, not someplace that anybody would enjoy. He was at the Champagne-Marne Defensive, which was 15 to 18 July, and that repelled the last German offensive. And after that, the Allies went on attack, which ultimately led to the German surrender 100 days later. As part of that, the Aisne-Marne offensive followed on to the stopping of the Germans. And the Battle of, gonna murder this, Orc-Germain, was pulling back from, the Germans were pulling back from their retreat to make a stand so that they could cover the rest of their troops as they moved back into Germany. And at that battle, Major Donovan went forward because the troops in his vanguard lost their commander, and he went forward to take over. And he had Oliver Ames stay at the battalion headquarters, but to take that over in his absence. But Ames felt strongly that his place was with Donovan, so he went forward with Donovan. And he caught up with Donovan, and Donovan was lying flat near a stream, and Ames fell in with him, and just as he did, a sniper shot for Donovan and killed Oliver Ames, hit him right in the head, and he died immediately. So after that, the soldiers from the 165th killed the sniper who made that shot. And Ames was buried where he fell. And shortly after that, Joyce Kilmer, I don't know if any of you remember Joyce Kilmer. He was the poet who wrote Trees, the poem Trees. He was also in the 165th, and he was killed very shortly after Ames. And he was buried next to Ames, right where they fell. Both were later moved to the cemetery, the Oz-Anse American Cemetery, which is a bit west of Reims in north-central France. He was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the Army's second highest military decoration for heroism in combat, and a square is named for him at the intersection of Commonwealth Avenue and Fenway Park. So that is Oliver Ames. And now to talk a little bit about my father. My father was always very interested in communications. He was in radio before as a boy, and then he was working for a company called General Communications in Providence, which is in the radio business. And he applied for admittance to I'm not going to take time to figure out what exactly it was, but in 1940, he applied to join the military in the communications area. And in May, he was accepted, and he reported to the military because of his background, he was assigned to the code room, and he was on duty at the code room on December 7th, which, as you all know, was when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And the reports of the damage from Pearl Harbor came into the code room in the afternoon of December 7th. And because he had he didn't live that close to the code room, so he drove his car in. Because he had his car, which was a little Crosley. I don't know if any of you remember the Crosleys, but they were, about so high and very, very small cars. And so he was given the reporting of the damages and drove it to the White House. And in those days, all the security stuff that we know of today hadn't been installed. So you could drive your car right up to the front of the White House. And that's what he did. And he delivered it, and he said there were two admirals on the steps waiting for him. And so it went in from him to the admirals to President Roosevelt. So that was something very memorable for him, which occurred even before the start of the war, because of course on December 7th, we hadn't declared war. So perhaps one of the most memorable moments of his whole experience was pre-war. After that, he went on to the Naval Postgraduate School, and on completing that, he was assigned to the USS Anthony, which is a destroyer built under construction later in 1942, but in Bath, Maine, and he went to Bath and he became a plank holder, and which is what they call people who are assigned to a ship from its commissioning. And first thing the Anthony did was they took a shakedown cruise from February 43 to April, and they went to Puerto Rico and Guantanamo. And then they set off the Pacific April 19th. They went through the Panama Canal, spent some time in Pearl Harbor, and arrived for action in early 1944. And I'm not going to go through all the various things that he did, but I did want to mention a few to sort of indicate the kind of experience he had. He was involved in the bombarding of Rabaul, New Britain, their ammunition and supply dumps. That's in the Solomon Islands. Now, you're like me, you've heard of them for years, but you're not really sure where they are. They are east of New Guinea, and New Guinea is north of Australia. And then, you know, a little later, he bombarded Saipan to prepare for the landing, and that's in the northern Mariana Islands, which is north of New Guinea and east of the Philippines. He then later bombarded Guam, which again is in the North Marianas, and that's a little southwest of Saipan. Shelling, he in July of '44, his ship, the Anthony, shelled Guam to cover the landing on Guam, and he said there was plenty of resistance. Then he was subject to a number of air attacks. The first one was in November of 1943, and he said the Anthony downed 11 planes in 6 minutes at Bougainville, which was the part of the Solomon Islands. That had to be quite an experience. He then experienced dive bombers at Green Island, which is near Bougainville. And then on June 19th, 1944, the Anthony repelled an attack of 400 Japanese planes, which, you know, was something. He was attacked with that because they were part of the escort of a carrier force, which was moving to intercept the Japanese fleet. And I think, you know, the Japanese were out to, you know, protect their fleet, and that's why there were so many planes. There were all sorts of miscellaneous things. He escorted merchant ships, with screening battleships, which is to be in front of the larger ships so that if there's any enemy ships coming through, they will be attacking the screening ships and not the battleships. And then picked up some pilots and delivered mail. It says here 23 ships, delivered mail to 23 ships at one point. And they, of course, did a lot of preparation, camouflaging the ship and doing training for bombing and radar and so on. Well, they the Anthony returned to San Francisco on the 25th of October, 1944, and my father mustered out, but he was transferred. And the rest of his naval experiences were, I think, not that important to him. What really meant a lot to him was his combat experience on the Anthony. But, so, thank you.
Wow. Okay, thank you so much, David. Our next speaker, or speakers, is John Amorum. He's a lifelong resident with his wife Linda's here. Attended Easton Schools, graduated in the class of 1963 at Oliver Ames. Linda was class of 61, if I'm not mistaken. John, right after graduation, enlisted in the Marines. This was in 1963. After graduating, reported to Paris Island. Just one thing here that, he spent 18 weeks in boot camp, was assigned to Camp Lejeune. In November of 65, he married Linda. And Christmas of that same year, just after that, he received orders to be deployed to Vietnam. Ooh, that was a quick honeymoon. Spent 1 month in orientation in January of 1966. He arrived in Da Nang, Vietnam, in February 66. He served with the 3rd Marine Division, 12th Marines, for 13 months. That was during a tough time over there. He returned to the States in March of 67, so we've been there for a long time. He was assigned to Camp Lejeune for the remainder of his service time. He was honorably discharged, of course, in July of 67 with the rank of Sergeant Amorum. After discharge, I didn't know this, he worked at Stonehill for 40 years as senior electrician. I never knew that. That's great. Remained in Easton and raised 3 children, all graduates of OA. Other members of the family also served in the military. Vasco, who just passed away, as a World War II veteran serving in the Pacific in the Navy. Dan Amorum served in Korea with the Army. His brother Bill served in the Air National Guard. And his sister Linda Amorum Pietropala spent 30 years in the Air Force Active and Reserve. And Linda was in the famous class of Oliver Ames of 1970. I say that because I was too. I just saw her yesterday. So, with John, come on up. John does not like speaking, so I put pressure on him yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know where I start. I get a lot of stories. Some historical and some not, but I haven't done something like this since high school in front of Mr. Burke, if anybody remembers. But it was always a trying time. But I joined the Marines actually in April of '63 before I graduated. And so they call that the inactive reserve. And they had, it was a delayed program, they called it 128 delay. So I didn't go in till the end of July. And I'm glad I went then instead of the 1st of July because South Carolina was just very brutal in the summer. Humidity is like 95 at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I pray to God every morning I make the 3-mile run before breakfast. And it was around the parade field until somebody dropped you, really. But it was training every day, all kinds of different things we did. After Paris Island, we went to Camp Lejeune, or Camp Geiger. It's on Camp Lejeune for infantry training for 5 weeks. And that was another different thing. It's they ran you from class to class outside. And this is in the middle of October to end of November. And so you're sitting in outdoor bleachers, and you're all sweaty, and you got a field jacket on. You take it off, but you catch cold and so on. They said we had half the company down with pneumonia sometime during November, because I kept seeing less and less guys. I don't know why I didn't get it, because I used to catch everything. But so anyway, I went to Camp Lejeune. I was in an infantry regiment. I was there for a little over 2 years. And Linda and I weren't going to get married till after I got out in '67, but I don't know what happened. So we got married. We were supposed to get married in September of '65. And my major says, don't do it because we're going on a cruise to Scandinavia. Well, that didn't happen. So she was a little ticked at that. She's doing all the planning from home. So we got married Thanksgiving weekend. I had 10 days off and got married. Went up to Canada, back to Montreal in November. They had snow up there, if you can believe it, at the end of November. And we headed back down to North Carolina. I'd be back there like December 10th. And around the 20th, 22nd, I got orders to Vietnam. I knew I was going. We both knew, but the major kept my name off the list. He said, I knew you just got married, so. Then he called me and he said, well, you're the last one in the company to go. So I said, okay. So I went to California for 4 or 5 weeks training out the jungle training in Southern California. California, if you can believe that. That was another treat. It was rolling hills, and everywhere you went, you ran. And my platoon sergeant at that time, that I met him in Parris Island. He was our rifle instructor. And when I was at 2nd Marines, Camp Lejeune, we were out of formation, and I see this guy walking in. And I said, I know that guy. So later in the day, I ran into him, and I said, hey, what are you doing here? And he says, why? Are you doing rifle inspections or rifle shooting, or what are you doing here? Well, how do you know anything? I said, well, you're my rifle instructor, Parris Island. So he never saw him again, really, until I got to California. And he was our platoon sergeant there. So I was only a PSC Lance Corporal at Camp Lejeune. And when I got to California, I was still a Lance Corporal. I got to Vietnam, I was still a Lance Corporal. And when I got to Vietnam, they said, well, you're up for promotion. You're the senior Lance Corporal in the battalion. So I made Corporal. So I had one sergeant that was the wire section. I was in telephone and communication. We had radio operators and all kinds of stuff there. But, so my sergeant left, another one came in, and then several months later, he got into a truck accident, and they shipped him home with an arm broken in 3 places. So I was out on Wild Lane with a crew one day, and the whole crew was laughing. And I said, what's the matter? What's so funny? Oh, you didn't hear. Coronado's going home, and you're in charge. So I had about 10, varied from 10 to 12 guys in the section. And a lot of them were from New England. I had a corporal from Belmont. And I had 7 or 8 draftees. I got almost all at once. One from Walpole, Fall River, New Bedford, Connecticut. I had an odd guy from Kansas. I said, what are you doing here? He said, I want to see the ocean. So the captain called me down one day and he says, come on down, I want to see you. I got another guy for you. I said, another draftee? He says, just come on down. So I got down. So I brought the guy from Walpole with me. So I'm in there and there's a kid sitting down. And so he says, captain says, here's your new man. And the kid stands up, he's shaking like a leaf. And he said, well, the reason you got him is because no one can understand him. And I said, where you from? He says, Bath, Maine, sir. But he was one of the hardest workers I had. We didn't lose anybody in my section. Radio operators, we had a few wounded people in 13 months. Wiremen, we never lost anybody. Booby traps were very big over there. Every day we came across something, grenade, a flare, a bullet and a bamboo stick that you step on and you blow your foot off. There was all kinds of things you ran into over there. After I got there, one of the older guys, well, I will say old, I was one of the oldest. A junior man to me, we drove into an artillery gun battery, and this NCO says to me, he says, I need you. And I said, what do you need me for? He says, tunnel rat. I said, that's a volunteer job, right? Yep, it is. He says, you're volunteering. I said, no, I'm not, because come next July, I get out in one piece. So we became friends. I found him 25 years later on the internet. And he says, I'm glad you remembered me. But one day they sent me to booby trap school. Actually, just 1 or 2 days. And they just showed you different booby traps, what to look for. Don't go through a gate. Don't walk on a dike. You walk in the water. Because that's where they booby trap all this stuff. But so one day one of the guys called me and he says, we got something out here, we don't know what it is. So I walked up there. And, yeah, we're retrieving all the wire lines from the gun battery that had left. And so there was some fins sticking out with wires around it. And so I said, okay, I'll call it in. So they said, okay, stay away, we'll get somebody out there. An hour or so later, a Jeep pulls in, some young kid driving it, and some bald guy gets out. And it was one of my drill instructors. One of my drill instructors from Paris Island. And he would used to scream and yell at us, never touch us, but scream and yell. And they never talked to you like you were a human being until last week there. But he started to tell us, and I was an EOD guy. He did demolitions. And well, anyway, so he drove in. I called him every name in the book. And he says, I'm going to have your stripes. I said, take them. I just got them yesterday. But he wanted to know what we had. I told him. So he was over there, and he got back, and he said, don't you know the difference between an HE round and illumination? I said, no, sir, I tried. Poor training, I guess. He said, well, I didn't tell you that. I didn't train you in that. I said, I know you didn't. So we did meet on the internet 20-something years later, and we wrote back and forth. And he died, one of my boot camp buddies wrote me from Florida, said he died 2010, I think. But he got out as when I met him in boot camp, he was a sergeant. Then I met him in Vietnam, he was a staff sergeant. He went up 1 rank. But he did 27 years in the Marine Corps. He got out as a captain. So he was, and I'm just reading this book about an EOD guy that was in the Marine Corps, lost both his legs. He was on Fox News in the morning sometimes. But he, reading the book about him and all his, and it's not about him. It's about all his friends that he met in his life, from school until presently. But he had to sit talking about the different booby traps, and I can remember some of the stuff that they try to do to you. It's pretty bad stuff. I don't know what else. Anyway, when I did come home, finish up that other story about my rifle instructor. When we flew from California to Hawaii to refuel to Okinawa before going to Vietnam, he was sitting beside me on the plane. When we flew from Okinawa to Da Nang, he's sitting beside me. To this day, I can never remember his name. 13 months later, he went up 1 rank, I had gone up 2 ranks, and we get on the plane, and he's sitting beside me again. And then from Okinawa to California, he's sitting beside me again. And you'd think I could ever remember this guy's name. I've got a picture, but no name. But he was quite a guy. But he made it home too. But I had 4 months to do when I come back. And so I got to go back to Camp Lejeune, finish up my 4 months. And there was a guy named Eddie Smith. He was a couple of years behind me in school. He was killed while I was here. He was in the Marines. He was in one of my gym classes in school. That's the only reason I know him, really. His brother was in my wife's class and Rick's. But he went into recon, and I didn't know that till long after he died. But he was like 40 miles from me when he got killed. And I read the story. They had called them after action reports of what happened. And stupid. They put him on the wrong mountain, on the wrong hill, and they lost their radio, and it was just one thing after another. He was the first killed anyway. But if I had known that, I could have come home with his body and come home a month early, because it happened on my 12th month. But I didn't know if Linda wrote me that he had died. And we had this newspaper, a lot of you guys remember, Stars and Stripes. Well, every week, I think it was a weekly paper, they had all the dead, a list of all the dead, and there's Eddie's name right there. I just went over how many Eddie Smiths are there. He was a good kid in school. So we ended up getting out. I went to work for Matt Welch, and I don't know if you people can remember him, but I could only take it 3 weeks. Left him, and I was gonna go over to the Edison, see if I could get into the Edison. I did pole climbing in school and everything else. And so they said, well, what can you do? I said, I can climb poles. And I can climb poles while getting shot at. I mean, so they said, we'll contact you. So they called me a week or so later and said, we got a job for you in sales. I said, nope. But you're gonna start out someplace. I said, not sales. So in the meantime, my brother had been working at Stonehill, and he says, why don't you come on down there? We just hired an electrician. So I went down there, and they hired me 2 days after they hired the other guy. So I stayed 41 years, and been hanging around doing nothing basically since. But got a guide and tried to keep that going, but it was useless this year, except cucumbers. That's the only thing that came in. But anyway, if I didn't have my family, I guess I wouldn't be here. But anyway, I guess that's about it.
So we've got our next speaker, Frederick A. Coe Jr. I think your whole family's in the back room. Has served actually over 5 years as security systems integrator and security director for companies such as American Science and Engineering, Eastern Video Systems, Massachusetts Army National Guard. Sergeant Major Coe is a combat veteran who served in the 211th Military Police Battalion, Massachusetts Army National Guard. His military duties include combat force protection and electronic security system operations in Bagram, Afghanistan, and Balad Air Base, Iraq. Second military specialty duties included as a weapons of mass destruction expert. You're scaring me now, Rick. He also attended and trained at the U.S. Army Chemical School, U.S. Army Corps of Engineer Protective Design Center, and the U.S. Army Military Police School. Since September 11, 2001, Sergeant Coe has been deployed on 3 military operations and missions to include Operation Noble Eagle, non-commissioned officer in charge of the military police, security airport missions throughout the state of Massachusetts in support of Homeland Defense, Operation Enduring Freedom. Soon after an initial invasion of Afghanistan, Sergeant Coe and 6 other soldiers were deployed to Bagram Air Base near central Afghanistan for law enforcement and force protection security operations against the Taliban. As Air Force Protection NCO, Sergeant Coe uses civilian security experience to help develop a model-based security plan that would also be used in future deployments. Operation Iraqi Freedom. He kept getting called up all the time. After returning in February of 2003 from 7 months in Afghanistan, off again for another mission, the entire 211th Military Police Battalion headquarters was deployed to support military police operations west and northwest of Baghdad. The Sunni Triangle towns of Fallujah and Balad. Convoy security and force protection plans for both sites came from Afghanistan deployment experience. For his contributions to support operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, Sergeant Coe has received 2 meritorious service medals, along with a Joint Meritorious Unit Award and Valorous Unit Award. At a ceremony in Kuwait, Camp Wolf, Sergeant Coe was recognized with a special coin. It's over here in, I think a lot of Rick's things are right there. A special coin presented by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Richard C. Myers. I love this. The oldest enlisted military policeman deployed in combat operations. At the time, he was only 60, and he was the oldest, during Operation Iraqi Freedom. You'll see that picture right there. It is awesome. Rick is living in East Bridgewater with the wife Sharon Beard Graves. They have 5 children. One has been deceased, Benjamin Graves, and has 4 wonderful grandchildren. Rick, come on up. He's the oldest living person here right now. I can coin you, Rick.
The Sergeant Major can't use this. All right, thank you. I'm in uniform. I'm 16 years old with 64 years of experience. That makes me 80. I'm still in uniform. We have a lot of, about 50 of my fellow soldiers who have been in the service over 20 years in the National Guard are still employed by the state. We can only wear Massachusetts. We can't put U.S. Army or U.S. Air Force on there. It's only Massachusetts. So we're confined, which my wife agrees you can't go out of the state, right? Yes, that's correct. So that's why I'm still working for the Adjutant General part-time. It's great. I mean, I can make my own hours, do with it as I wish and everything else. So it's fun. My career in the military started right here at Easton. All these roads, riding bikes, all over the place. And Frothingham Park, where I do upper body development with the rings. Now let me tell you, when I joined the Coast Guard and I went down to boot camp, all of a sudden, the 3rd week, my team, my little platoon, we had to go through the mud pit. But in order to get across the mud pit, you had to use these rings to go across. Now, everybody else didn't know how to use rings. They're all dropping into the mud and having to walk through and everything else. I said, guys, I want you to follow me. I learned this. What? You learned what? Frothingham Park. I'm from Frothingham Park. You don't know what that is, but I'll tell you, it's going to help you. I showed them how to do the rings. We're the only platoon ever in boot camp to go across there. The whole thing. How do they do that? Who taught them that? That was from Frothingham Park. Thank you. People have said that everybody from Easton, the Olive Branch people, they have upper body development. Well, they said that about the girls too. But it was great. I wanted adventure. I wanted to see what's beyond Bay Road, because it was so great as kids, 10-year-olds, riding out the Bay Road. What's beyond Bay Road? I think that must be the end of the world or something like that. What's out there? But that was it, and I wanted to see. I went to the Proctor Recruiter, and I went in. Here are the Marines looking nice, Army, Air Force, and over in the corner was this Coast Guard guy with dungarees on and a chambray shirt, fixing something on his desk. He looks interesting. I'm going to go over him. Well, I joined the Coast Guard, and I wanted to travel because I asked him, there's no travel in the Coast Guard, right? Oh, yes, there is. Get on an icebreaker. You want to go to the South Pole? Well, that's kind of cold. He said, listen, in order to get to the South Pole from Boston, you got to go through San Juan, Panama, Tahiti, Fiji, Samoa, New Zealand, North Island, and South Island. And then you go to the South Pole and work with your ship. Then you got to come back all through those islands. That's for me. So that was fun. That was absolutely fun. Toward the end of my 4-year enlistment, I wanted to go to Vietnam. So I applied for what they call upward market time in the Coast Guard. They were going to be part of the Navy. Our white 82 footers are going to be painted gray. And this Lieutenant Bell, who was with me, encouraged me to go with him and his boat. And so I did it. I had all the paperwork ready. Our ship, the Castle Rock at the time in Boston, had to leave on an emergency search and rescue. Well, I was slated to go to San Diego. So that here's all your paperwork. Take it. You're gonna go. I didn't sign the shipping over papers. Now those in the military understand what shipping over means. You ship over for another 4 years. You just sign this. Well, I took it all over. When I got to San Diego, I found out that this 82-footer, the Point Volcom, unfortunately was hit by our own Air Force out at sea. This is outside of Vietnam to prevent all the enemy from, transporting stuff into the coast and everything else. That's what the purpose of those boats were. And I got shot. He got shot, wounded. Commander was killed, and one of the crew members. That was a sign, I thought, that I shouldn't go to Vietnam. So I didn't. No. And I did that, and I got through that. And then later I went to seminary. Now, for a sailor to go to seminary, it's just a language problem. I had enough. And I had a good time. I learned some things about organized religion and everything else about it. And finally, the director said, "You'd be good as a Christian soldier instead." So then I went from there to the National Guard and the Army. And then got my military training. It was great. I just waited for another mission. 9/11 happened, things went chaos, like you wouldn't believe. And we were the first ones into Afghanistan. And it's Bagram. And believe me, when I heard that Bagram was being, vacated and with everything in it, because we did a lot to really secure the whole security part of that air base. We spent a lot of time there. And we went from Bagram, after 7 months there, my main duty was, believe it or not, the hardest duty I had. And I'm gonna show you a little picture. I was his escort for a week, Robin Williams. And pass this around. This guy is an amazing guy. He showed up without notice. He didn't want the press to know. He just came in and he's just walking into our provost marshal's office, which was right at the airfield. I said, "What the hell are you doing here?" And then he went into one of his comedy skits, which he always does. I said, "You gotta be kidding." Well, he said, the colonel assigned me to stay with him for a whole week. I said, "Oh my God. This guy does routines in his dreams and says them out loud while he's sleeping." I kid you not, but he is a fantastic guy. And the best part was when he was giving a presentation on the stage. We had a USO stage and everything else. All of a sudden, it was sunset. The flag was coming down. Bugles were sounding. Everybody turned, saluted, and then turned his back on him because the flag was over there. Robin was like this. Did I say something? Why is everybody turning their back on me? Well, he didn't realize that. Well, it really hit him what it was all about at that point, and he learned a lot. And it was unfortunate that he's no longer with us, but what a great guy. We went on from there. I came back. My wife was, "Oh, this is great. He's home. 60, he's going to be 60 years old. I got to go back." "What do you mean? What'd you forget?" "Now we're going to invade Iraq." I said, you gotta be kidding. They wouldn't let us go from Fort Drum, where we had to go back, because there's a process going from Title 32 as a federal soldier to a state National Guard back. There's a process. They wouldn't let us. And it was unfortunate, but that's the way missions go and everything else. So we fought our way through it. We learned a lot. And I couldn't figure out why would they let an old soldier continue serving. I just couldn't make that, there are a lot of young soldiers here. Little did we learn that the Iraqi people, the Shiites, and also the other tribes, they wouldn't talk to young soldiers, young officers, only to the elders. They had a system. So here I am, I'm the chief negotiator on all these missions. They put me up front. And then I would relay through the interpreter back and forth. So that's the reason they kept me in, because I couldn't figure out they have to be really desperate to do this. So that was just one of those things. But here I am, I'm still working for the TAG. I can tell you, we, being in the National Guard, we've been doing this for the last 10 years. We've been teaching the Ukrainian soldiers how to fight. A lot of people don't know that, because we tell them, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody what you're doing. Well, we taught them, it's amazing, because there are 7 means of communication in the United States Army and military. Russia has 3. We told them how to disrupt it. All of a sudden on the news, we hear that Russian generals are being shot. Why? The general is way behind the lines. His troops are up here fighting. Why would that happen? They disrupted the lines of communication, so the general has to go up front. He goes up front, he gets shot. We started congratulating each other up at headquarters, and nobody knew what we were doing. But that's what we were doing, congratulating, because we taught them that. And then the biggest thing was keep your mouth shut. The press is not there for you. We hated the press in Iraq, especially that Geraldo over there. Oh my God. Because you can tell them something, and next thing you know, it'll be on TV, broadcasting everything, and elaborating. Of course, changing their whole thing about that. That's the one thing we know in the military, keep your mouth shut. So what I just told you about Ukraine, you do not talk about it. Yes?
Several years back, I was a volunteer at the National Archives, and I knew a service person who was working there as a security guard, and he mentioned Geraldo Rivera. Well, somebody punched his lights out. I just wanted to tell you that. But he said that he was laid out because he was too much of a menace to the troops.
He was bad. One of the last things that I just like to say, we love National Guard history, which goes back to 1736. I think there's one of the posters, Johnny, that of the first muster.
Yeah, it's on the top left in the first case.
Yeah.
It says the first
The
muster.
first muster.
Yep.
And a lot of things happened with that. And I love the National Guard history, especially in Massachusetts, because here's where it all started. Here's where the military started, everything else, train bands. In order to have a town in Massachusetts, you had to have a militia or a train band. And the first train bands were in Salem, 1636 on the first muster. Loved it. I went to a person who was talking about the history of the Yankee Division. And one of the things that I learned, and I shouted out something, but during World War I, in France, a person by the name of Louis A. Frothingham and his wife bought up a hotel, 2nd and 3rd floor of the most famous hotel in Paris. down by the Eiffel Tower. And they said, I want any World War II or World War I soldier coming in from the Yankee Division, free room, free meals, concierge service, like that. And I'm going, I know him. And all these colonels are looking around and, how do you, what? But it was that, it was such a thing, and it was amazing. But those are the little things that help out and everything else. If you have any questions while I'm up here, you can raise your hand or do push-ups. Anything more you want?
What? So it's 82 feet long?
Yes.
The 82?
Yep.
That wasn't a PT boat, was it?
No. It wasn't. It was a very high freeboard going up
Okay.
like this. And it was best to, it was high enough that a lot of people could, you could see.
Now, did that sit like 8 or 10 feet in the ocean, the water? You could run up rivers and stuff?
Yep.
The ship I was stationed on, the USS South River, was an LSMR and had a lot of armament on it at one time and used to run up and down the, well, that was 273 feet long, but they used it to run down through the rivers and take
Yeah.
around and stuff.
Yeah.
It was 60 feet above the water, but only 10 feet into the water.
Yeah.
So they could, and blast out everything that got in its way. They turned that into undersea, Naval Undersea Research and Development Program. And it turned out to be a sister ship to the Calypso. I was just looking at that one over there.
I'll tell you,
It was set up the same way.
I'll tell you a funny story, being on the icebreaker Eastwind. When you first get down to McMurdo Sound and you're gonna break ice, because you're gonna break ice to bring all the transport ships in to reimburse everything on the base itself. They had, and I couldn't figure it out, and of course I was new, they kept their mouth shut. Traffic light was in the mess deck. And it was always green. So I figured, maybe it's something, I don't know. Couldn't figure it out. But what happens, because an icebreaker, when it breaks ice, goes back quarter mile, full steam ahead. When it hits the ice, it goes up like this, high, crushes down, high again, crushes down, and third time, if you can get it, crushes down, and then backwashes all the ice, and then backs up. Now, if you're having chow with your tray and your coffee and everything else, and you're sitting on the mess deck like this, and all of a sudden you see a yellow light. Hey, look at a yellow light. Well, that's standby. You're about gonna hit the ice. And then bang, red light goes on. You're supposed to grab your tray. And then boom, the tray comes to you. Like that. But that was the funniest thing I learned in the military. It was funny.
Thank you, Rick.
So you have a bar here?
Yes. See Paula. She's right there. Oh, she's the barmaid.
Thank you for your service, continuation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Our last speaker, pretty important person. I just met her, and actually I found her on Facebook, the American Legion, and I see a great picture of her. That she is the new commander of the American Legion Post 7 in Easton right now. Name's Elizabeth Riley. She's with us today. Elizabeth served in the U.S. Army from '84 to 2013, retiring with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Her career included assignments in the National Guard, Army Reserves, and active duty. Her specialty was logistics in plans, operations, and training. She served as a division medical supply officer for the Mass National Guard Battalion, the National Guard liaison officer for the state of Nebraska. Long story there to get to Nebraska, I heard that. The G4 supply officer for the Rhode Island Army Reserve Field Hospital, and G4 for the 94th. Tell Ricky to stop talking weird. Reserve Readiness Command during global war on terrorism in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. OEF and Operation Iraqi Freedom. In this capacity, Elizabeth was instrumental in preparing units for mobilization as well as assisting them upon their redeployment phase. Elizabeth served as the Chief of Patient Administration of the 1,000-bed General Hospital and as the Medical Operations Officer in charge of the medical treatment facility of a joint military base in Guatemala. She oversaw the daily operations of the medical facility as well as coordinating several humanitarian missions with the local community leaders to include medical, dental, vision services, and veterinarian support. Elizabeth also served as the Equal Opportunity Advisor for a U.S. Army Reserve the 804th Medical Brigade, meeting with soldiers throughout New England, conducting briefings on a variety of subjects such as sexual assault, sexual harassment, cultural diversity, etc. Elizabeth deployed to Iraq and Kuwait. She served as a medical operations officer in addition to assisting in the Base Emergency Operations Center, while also leading a team as the assistant training and advise the ADA team chief, an assignment that involved working directly with the Iraqi military, providing training and guidance in the areas of vehicle maintenance, operations, weapons and ammunition, storage, and general supply depot operations. Elizabeth continues to serve the veteran community, currently commander of the Disabled American Veterans, the DAV chapter in Taunton, as well as the American Legion Post 7 in Easton, Massachusetts, as we talked about. She is also involved in the Taunton Veterans Allied Council, the Military Veterans Allied Council, and is co-group facilitator of her Vet to Vet Women's Veterans Group. I introduce Elizabeth Bradley.
Thank you. So when I was 18, I raised my hand. I went down to the recruiters. And I knew I didn't want the Marines. I already got that from my parents. The face-to-face confrontation. But when I was a child, I wanted to be a campfire girl. And my mom put me into the Girl Scouts. I can't even do arts and crafts. I ended up with super glue on my fingers. I can't even glue popsicle sticks together. So I went over to the Army and I signed up as an 18-year-old. And the recruiter had asked me, well, what do you want to be? I'm thinking, heck, that's what my parents are asking me. What do I want to be? I'm 18. So I asked him, he said, well, I'm MP, right? I asked what branch he was in. He said, I'm military police. I said, okay, I'll sign up. I'll be a military policeman. And I was on the delayed entry program, so I had 6 months before I start basic training. So I thought, well, I'll do a semester of college. So I went to college at Suffolk University. And I saw this thing called ROTC, and it had camouflage on it, and I'm thinking, well, seems like it's military related. Maybe if I sign up for that class, when I go to basic training, I'll learn how to march and salute, and maybe they'll take, some they'll take notice of that, and maybe I'll get promoted or do something special, right? So I joined ROTC and I'm asking questions and I'm learning map reading, and of course I'm learning how to do push-ups and sit-ups and all that. And they took notice, and one day they approached me and they said, listen, how would you like Uncle Sam to pay for your college education? And then this way, I'm sending a picture around of me in basic training. But this way, when you graduate as an officer. I was like, okay. And they said too, it's a snowball effect. You're in college, stay in college, get your degree. Because, you get out after the semester, you go to basic training, who knows when you'll be going back to school and finishing your degree. So I did, I stayed in college. I got my degree in criminal law because I'm thinking I'm going into the military police. Well, when I got commissioned, I was told, unfortunately, I couldn't go military police because at the time, women weren't allowed in military police. They were combat units. So I went into the medical service branch. So, again, when I had raised my hand and signed on the dotted line, my family and my friends, they were asking me, hey, are you going to make a career? What's your plans in the military? I said, I don't know. I'm going to stay in as long as my heart's in it. And I served for 28 years. And I would have served longer, but it's really hard as a mom in the military when you have 3 little ones. Because no matter what we're wearing, where we are, we're thinking about our family. And when you're in combat and you get emails from your 10-year-old, Mom, Dad didn't sign us up for summer camp. Are we still going to summer camp? Mom, Daddy won't let us ride our bikes to Mary's house. I have to, take care of that. When you have 3 daughters, leaving them with your husband, it's a little challenging too. So I would call up email my girlfriend and say, hey, maybe you could offer to take the girls school shopping. And then I'll get an email from my husband saying, hey, Carol on the Blue just contacted me and asked him if she could take the girls school shopping. Well, she didn't call out of the blue. She called because I had called her. And it's really hard. It's really hard because when I raised my hand and I started my military career, I was in a few years when Desert Storm, Desert Shield hit. And I was like, hey, Commander, can I go? They need help, can I go? I was too important, they wanted me there. And then when I met my husband and we got married, we were both in the reserves. And I thought, I'll do a few more years, I'll get out. I had like 18 in, and he had 24 years in. And I thought, yeah, he'll get out in a few years after that. We were only married a few years when 9/11 hit. Neither one of us got out. And it was like a revolving door. Either he was gone, or I was gone, and we're having our family. When 9/11 hit, I was expecting my second child. And so it's hard. And I remember he was at Devon's working for the Operations Center at Devon's a few days after 9/11. And I called him up and I said, honey, I think I'm in labor. He said, are you sure? I was like, well, I don't know. Because I've never, I said, just get home, please. So he was upset that he had to leave his office and come home and take me into Boston. And within 12 hours, I had my daughter. And, he didn't take any time off because, the mission came first. So, I'm back in the hospital, for like 2 days before I'm released. And he's back in the office. I come home with a newborn and I just had one that was 2. And, he's back doing his thing. He goes, honey, I have to take care of New England. I'm like, okay, take care of New England. But mission's first. I remember when Desert Storm, Desert Shield hit, I was in Kansas. And I guess I have to share the story about Nebraska and Kansas first, but when I was applying for college, and I applied to college not just in New England, but outside of New England. And again, I'm applying for college because that's the thing that, we were raised to do in my family. You go to school, you go to college, and then you get married, and you have the 2.5 kids in the house and the white picket fence, and you live happily ever after. And that's why, after I applied for college, I'm thinking, heck, there's something more. I'm 18, there's something more, and that's why I joined the military. But in the meantime, I'm getting all these letters back from colleges in Massachusetts. But I'm not hearing back from any of these other colleges that I applied to outside of Massachusetts. And one day I'm in my father's car, and he asked me to get something from the glove compartment. And I opened up the glove compartment, and there are all those letters. I was like, Dad, he said, you're my only daughter. I'm not ready to see you grow up and go off to college somewhere. Little did he know, a few weeks later I had joined the Army, right? But he made a promise to me. He said, listen, just stay local, and then if you want to advance your degree, you can go wherever you want, but at least you're nearby, and I'll get used to you growing up and being more independent. And of course, when I went to basic training and AIT, and he was worried, his daughter's going into the military, but he was so proud of his daughter being in the military. And he would tell the mailman, the milkman, the person at the grocery store, my daughter's in the military. My daughter just got promoted. I mean, if I got promoted, you get a letter saying, you got promoted. And they would frame it. My parents had to frame it in the home. So when I graduated college, I went into the Medical Service Corps. I was with the Division Medical Supply. I was a Division Medical Supply Officer on Commonwealth Ave with the Massachusetts National Guard. The year after that, I went to graduate school in Kansas. So that's how I ended up in Kansas. And I was with a medevac unit out in Nebraska. I wanted to go to flight school. But during flight school, my father would say, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm learning how to type, because I don't want to worry my father. So, one time we had an emergency landing, and we landed in the parking lot of a mall. It was like 10 at night. And the father has the kids on their shoulders, and they see a helicopter in the parking lot. And then I take off my helmet, they see it's a woman. They're like, oh, look at a girl, like it's a demonstration or something. And we're all nervous because we didn't know what was wrong with the helicopter. It was hydraulic fluid, but it kept yawing, and we had to make an emergency landing. But I didn't tell my dad. I just said, hey, I had to stay after training yesterday because I didn't get enough words in for the typing. Even in basic training, when we're learning how to throw grenades, and we're on the firing line, and we're doing all kinds of stuff. I have to kind of low-key it, because I don't want to worry my father. But when I was in Kansas and then in Nebraska they were looking for a National Guard liaison officer. Because every summer, the National Guard and Reserves, they do that 2 weeks of training. And this particular year, they're having a bunch of units, National Guard units, go to this base. And they needed a National Guard liaison officer to go around to various National Guard units and to acquire the equipment that these units needed for their training for the 3 weeks that they were there. So I was acquiring communication equipment. I was acquiring all kinds of weapons. I was acquiring C4 so they could blow up little things. And even vehicles and tanks, APCs, armored personnel carriers. And I remember one time too, they invited me out and they wanted me to drive a tank. And I'm going really slow, and they're like, ma'am, put the pedal to the metal. And they turned white when I finally finished driving, and they're speechless, and from that point on, they called me Speedy Lizzie, right? Because, I did what they told me to. They said, put the pedal to the metal. But when Desert Storm and Desert Shield started, and I was living in Kansas, it's just a matter of who's going to get called? Who's going to get called? And you understand this. In the reserves and in the National Guards, every month you report up the chain. And you report, hey, you know, I have 100% of my personnel, I have all my equipment, all my personnel is trained up to speed. I mean, you have to send this report up the channels. And that's what they use when they have conflicts, when they have situations when you get called certain units. And so when Desert Storm and Desert Shield begun, higher levels, they're looking at units that they could call up. And there's this one unit, there's an evacuation hospital. I'm like, hey, we need to send medical personnel over there, not just MPs, not just infantry, but we need to send support staff. And these were my colleagues, these were my friends. And they called up this evacuation hospital, and what they realized was you have units, you know, they don't want to be in the red. So they might do some finagling. And so you had like a medic and a cardiologist slot. You may have, you know, an infantry person over here. So they were playing a numbers game. And they were saying, hey, we're 100%, you know, trained up. Well, when they got them all together, they realized they weren't. And so these individuals, my friends, they were stationed at Fort Riley because they needed all this training. And so over the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I had an open house. I said, hey, come by if you want. And some did, some didn't, but it wasn't a festive time because I'm looking at someone and I'm realizing they're going to be leaving soon. Are they going to come back? And if they come back, are they going to be the same? So no one was really like laughing. It wasn't really a joyous occasion. It was a time too when no one really talked about it. They knew it was something they had to do, but no one really talked about it because of the uncertainty. So fast forward, after 9/11, then I got called on a Thursday, and I was told, hey, report on Monday, you've been activated in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. I have a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4.5-year-old. And I'm thinking, okay, I have a few days to find someone to watch my babies. And that was hard because my spouse was already in Afghanistan. So I'm like, who am I going to get to watch my babies? And the babysitter, the woman who was watching them on weekends while I was in the reserves, I reached out to her and she said, well, are you going to pay me medical? I was like, no, I can't pay you medical. I had a good friend that I've known since I was 10. She actually moved into my house with her 2 boys and watched my girls and enrolled her boys into the local school system. So my girls could have a stable, familiar environment while I served at Devens. And that's when I started 2.5 years of any unit in New England, any reserve unit under our brigade that was activated. They had so many months to get ready. And so my job was to work with that unit, make sure they got all their personnel, that all their personnel were trained, that they had all their equipment was ready to go. And then when they moved from Devens to either Fort Drum, New York, or down to Fort Dix, I would go with them. And I would make sure, I was like the liaison, I would make sure, because sometimes vehicles will break down, sometimes a person will get injured and they'll need a replacement. So I would make sure, I would be one of the last ones to sign off, making sure they were good to go before they were sent over. And then when they came back, I would meet them at Fort Drum or at Fort Dix and check to see how they were doing. And then set up a plan with them so we could reconstitute. Find out when their equipment's coming back to the States, if it's coming back to the States, and then work with them. And all the mechanics that were interested, I had jobs for them, so they could stay on orders. I got them to work at the AMSA shop because we had such a backlog of units coming back, and then the equipment came back, and there was short staff in the maintenance shops, and so I would find out who the mechanics were and have them work in these shops. And they get, regular pay, and they're working in the shops. And sometimes too, if there was a permanent opening, a job opening, the supervisor has already seen, Sergeant Jones performance and would recommend by name that Sergeant Jones becomes that replacement. And so now Sergeant Jones has a job even when his assignment is up, with us. So that made me feel good that at least a dozen of the mechanics that I had assigned to these shops throughout New England, because I would have to go to Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, and check to see, how we do with the backlog of equipment. And then one last story. So when I'm in Iraq, and I went over there as the medical operations officer, and I'm in the brigade, and I'm supposed to run the medical portion of it, I got tapped on the shoulder, and I was told, hey, you're gonna be working with the Iraqis on the assist, train, and advise team. And so each section had to release a person to be part of my team. So I got the oldest, I got the complainer, and I got the dead who didn't want to do anything, right? So I got those 3 people. But we worked together, and one of them, the specialty was ammunition. And so they would work with the Iraqi soldiers because the Iraqis just had ammunition out there, in the sun. And so that individual would say, hey, we need to store ammunition. It has to be at a certain temperature, if not, it'll explode. And another soldier worked with them on equipment. Because, remember, it wasn't just us that were in Iraq, the other countries as well. And so as the other countries would leave, they would leave their equipment. So there's all kinds of vehicles. And you can't just leave it. You have to teach them how to drive it. You have to teach them how to maintain it. And so my other soldier would teach them how to drive them, maintain them, and then line them up and put them by category. And then we had another soldier too with weapons, because they would just store all these weapons in these big aircraft hangars. You walk in and they're tossed on top of each other, and you don't know what's what. And so we would help them organize and put the weapons by category. And the U.S. had actually spent lots of money and built this huge depot center for them. And we had shelves, and we're trying to teach them too. Heavy items on the bottom, lighter items on the shelf. Most of them didn't read and didn't know anything about computers. So everything had to be done in writing, and just trying to do it in basic steps. There's a saying in the military: KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So whether it's a standard operating procedure, or whether it's a memo on instructions, anything, you just need to keep it in basic form. So, we're trying to walk them through all of this, because my unit was one of the last units to leave Iraq. And because of that, I'm part of the Operation New Dawn. So, we're all familiar with Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, but we may not know what Operation New Dawn is. And that's like the tail end of Iraq. That's the units that basically closed down, handed everything over to the Iraqis and stepped out. But it's unfortunate because it wasn't long before we got home when they were attacked. And when they're not self-sufficient and they don't have the confidence level and they don't have strong leadership, it's hard for them to defend themselves. But if you would like a few minutes, I could tell you a funny story about my mom. When I was in Kansas, right after Desert Storm, Desert Shield, my mom came up for a visit. Remember that word? And she's reading the local newspaper one day, and she sees this military family. The husband's getting ready to be deployed. The wife, she's going to nursing school, and she needs someone to watch the 2 children after school. So my mom applied and got the job. And, my father will call up my mom and say, honey, when do you plan on coming home? It was a visit. And my mom's like, well, I can't now because, I got this job And I committed myself, and I'm gonna stay here with this family until the husband comes home from Iraq. Thanksgiving came, Christmas came, you know, she's still watching the children. But during that time too, if she wasn't watching the children, she was reading the local newspaper at Fort Riley, Kansas. And so she knew what units were getting ready to be deployed or what units were arriving home. And she would go. And she would look around and see single soldiers that had no family or friends there to see them before they left. And she would go up to them and she'd give them a hug. And she'd say, Jones, I'll be here when you get back, right? Or Smith, I'll be here when you get back. It didn't matter if the unit arrived at 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. She would wake me up and say, well, remind me, hey, there's a unit coming and we have to go. And we would go. And so even though my father's home alone for the holidays, my mom felt like she was there for the soldiers, and she was there for that one family and helping out that one family. I was the only female in my family that joined the military and stayed in as long as I did. I have uncles who were in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, cousins in Vietnam, but I was the only one that joined and stayed in long, and I think, you know, the officer too, and I would have stayed in longer, but after 28 years in my last deployment in Iraq and Kuwait, I realized that if I keep saying yes and keep getting promoted, I'm going to be seeing my family less and less. And my children were still in middle school, and one was still in elementary school, and I just missed being a mom. So after 28 years, I said, no, I'm okay with a lieutenant colonel. And I got out and supported my husband, who continued to stay in. He actually served for 42 years between active duty and National Guard Reserve. And yeah, so my 3 daughters, I told them, between your dad and I, we served a total of 70 years. There are other ways to serve the military besides wearing a uniform. But it's hard. It's hard being a mom and being in the military and then having a spouse who also serves in the military. But I did it, and my kids were there, and if it wasn't for my family, my children, my spouse, I don't know how we would have done it. But and I thank you for listening to my story and seeing my picture when I was in basic training.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and all the speakers. I think that was wonderful. Let's give them all a great round of applause. And all of you been sitting down, we can go get something to eat because the food's going to go bad. Please get something to eat. Thank you very much for coming today.